this.
That's okay. I'm almost
Well, we're
done.
already going live now, so that's happening. Hey everybody, coronavirus, Central Unscripted. If you hear noises in the background, the wife decided she needed to clean this evening, so that's what you might be hearing. So say hi to Dana, everybody in the chat. She'll be along with us momentarily. She didn't finish in time. And I just want to say hi to everyone. Glad you are here, getting ourselves lined up here. I don't have this well set up, but since when do we know we're doing? That's not an important skill anymore. The thing we test every week is how well you can do things by the seat of your pants. And that's what we do here in Coronavirus Central. That's what we're doing here in the United States of America, around the world, as we go through a crazy moment. So before I go into it, I just want to ask how everyone's doing tonight. I hope that you're all doing well. We're going to kind of have a little bit of a laid-back show this evening. We'll talk about your questions. We'll talk about the facts of what's happening out there. A lot of lockdowns happening all around the country, a lot of news, a lot of rumors. We'll go wherever you want. Make this easy on me. Ask questions, bring up topics. It's much easier for me to spend 10 minutes talking about what interests you than spend 60 minutes coming up with more content of what I think might interest you, just based on the fact that I talk about it in the morning. So glad to see everyone's here. Good to see lots of friends. Just say a little quick shout out to people here. Good to see you, Seaver. As always, thank you for being here. Laurel, glad to see you. Throttle, good to see you. Jose, welcome. McSparron, good to see you as well. Very glad to hear your story. Let's see. Rev Match, good to see you as well. Wildcards and Misfits and Dabblers. PDX, that sounds good. All right, good to see you. And good to see you, John. So let me start with a little soliloquy. And I don't, I used to do a political show, and I don't really like to talk about that stuff right now because it's not really important, but I have to do one little rant. Because I can't get it off my chest, and I'm going to just get it out with you guys. You can listen, and you tell me if I have the right of it. So a guy gets in touch with me from the Daily Beast. I forget what his name is. Will something. Will Summer. That was his name. And he's like, oh, I want to do a story on Coronavirus Central. So I'm like, okay, well, let's do the story. I'm like, great. I can get some information out there. I can help people. I can save lives, And that's what I've been doing since day one in this. If I had any other intention, I wouldn't have had to do it because, frankly, the easiest thing for me would have been to do nothing. I could have kept a little bit more hair, a lot more money, and be practicing my French, which I love to do. But I didn't do that because I don't think that way. When a crisis happens, I try to step in and be a helpful asset to my community, to the people around me. And so I did that. So I agree, okay, I'll do the phone call with this guy. And I'm like, okay. And look, I know not to trust the media. Me and the media have had a bad relationship for a lot of years. They lie about me, and I can't afford to sue them. That's basically the relationship we have. It's basically, it's abusive. If it were any other sort of a relationship, they'd be in jail for being criminals. But unfortunately, no one realized that until we've seen how badly they've bungled this mess. Nonetheless, we continue. So the guy calls me up, and all he wants to talk about, he's like, how do you want to talk about this tweet that you did in 2017? I'm like, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and you want to discuss my politics from 3 years ago. And I'm like, have you no decency? Don't you care that people are dying? He's like, oh, I guess that's important. Yeah, you bet your ass it's important. And these people get paid tens of thousands, some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars to go out there. And what do they want to talk about? How we can fight one another. Now, look, if I was as much of a dick as they made me out to be, I would literally be sitting up here in my cabin in northern Maine watching people on the coast die because, frankly, hey, you don't agree with my politics, or you don't agree with my religion, or you don't look like me. And I've done completely the opposite since day one, and so many Americans have. But you know who hasn't? Our media hasn't. Our politicians, too many of them haven't. And what's happening because of that? People are getting sick. People are getting hurt. People are dying. The economy's collapsing. So what is the sickness of COVID really? And that's the larger point I want to make of it. It is people who are caught in a mindset where they cannot abandon the things they like to fight about, that they love fighting each other so much, whether it's over money or ideology or identity or all this stuff, that they are not the survivors who will be coming into the new world. And this world is dying, man. Look at that stock market. We're going down into 20,000 tomorrow. Worst day in history, right? Look at those numbers. All the sad people are dying. I'm not trivializing it. But why did this happen? Because every one of us was willing to compromise some people dying, some people suffering, because we thought it would make our lives a little bit better. And the people at the top, the people we entrusted with power, okay, the people who have been decision makers in our society, be they the politicians, be they the media, be they the bankers, all of these people were all part of the problem, and they've all done everything. They weren't willing to spend a couple $100 million to stop this at the beginning. They weren't willing to shut down the border. Now they're spending trillions of dollars to try to save their own skins. to save the system that made them rich and us sick. And now what are we dealing with? They attack the messengers. I'm sorry, but you want to attack the messenger? Here is my message to you. Health is coming back to this world. We will fight COVID. We will overcome the coronavirus. And we, as one people, will move together and we will survive. But we will remember when this is all done, the crimes against humanity that were committed by those who chose to put money before lives. Because you know what? Last time I checked, when you were willing to take money to kill someone, that was a crime too. And if it isn't, it should be. That's my little soliloquy to start you off. So I've been hot about that all day. And you know, look, it doesn't really matter. The people who know me. And what they do is they write terrible stories because they want to scare you away from information. And it does show one important thing. Coronavirus Central is putting such important information out there. I've had the real pleasure, the honor of talking to a number of nurses, of doctors, medical researchers, professionals, professional planners, nonprofit, community leaders, some people in politics. It doesn't matter who they are. I'm not going to say their names. Don't want to embarrass them. But I will say that what we are doing collectively, and it is a group effort because you guys share the information as much as I do. You bring in the information as much as I do. I'm just a loudmouth with a lousy camera here and a spotlight in a cabin in Maine. But what I'm able to do is put these ideas out there to offer you the benefit of my analysis. And, I'm good at understanding things. It gets me in trouble sometimes, but it gets me out of trouble. And that's what each of you need now. We're going into a new phase of this disease. Up to this point, we've been talking about how we avoid the panic, how we set ourselves to prepare, and we've done that. If you've been watching, if you've been listening to the podcast since we started in February, or if you knew my book since January, or if you knew me before this happened, you know I was someone who was always emphasizing things were going to radically change and we need to prepare. I did not anticipate this pandemic. Lord knows I would never wish for it. Nonetheless, the fact is there were a lot of problems out there, and sane people could see that something would happen, including the many virologists who predicted that mankind's push deeper into the jungles, would lead to these things, or are experimenting with biological warfare. Pick whatever reason you think it is. But the fact is, for a long time, our intellect has outpaced our wisdom, and that's led to certain problems. And that's what we're dealing with here, the consequences of poor decisions being amplified. And to this moment, we are dealing with that. And I want to say this, too, because with the virus, a lot of people send me a lot of things. Tom, do you think this is related to 5G? Do you think this is related to Agenda 2030? Do you think this is related to, a mass vaccine agenda? I don't know. I mean, is anything possible? Of course. But here's what I would say. We got to win one battle before you win the next one. You can't lose. It does you no good if you're in the middle of a battle for your life, which we are against this virus, and you're worried about the enemy over the hill when that just getting up to take a look for them will get you shot in the head. That's how we have to look at this. We have to look at it as a virus. We have to be very mindful, and we have to use good common sense. Thank you, dear. So you have to look at it that way, and you have to.
I'm sorry, it was driving me.
Getting on the camera,
it was driving me crazy.
Dana. She's not happy with that. You can see she's got a little snake around her neck. We have ball python here. Anyway, so we actually have several ball pythons, but that's neither here nor there. So what I'm saying to you is that as we go forward through this and we go into this new phase, right? What we are going to have to do is we're going to have to watch. We're going to have to intelligently assess. And you're going to have some time to think about this. If you don't already, you're going to be in quarantine soon, unless you're a medical professional worker, and anything we can do to support you, we will. But start thinking, what got us in this trouble? What fights did we have we didn't need to? And what decisions societally did we make poorly? If you start thinking that way now, you'll see the fault lines emerge. I'll give you an example. I was reading a story this evening from Zero Hedge, and they were talking about how Kraft Heinz was looking for $4 billion in extended credit lines. And I'm like, that's sort of curious. You would think that the food company would be in a position, especially a direct manufacturer like that, to make money like crazy right now because everyone's going to be at home cooking. And yet they're worried about needing more liquidity. What does that say? Well, to me, it says two possibilities. It says possibility number one, which is the optimistic interpretation, is they're going to have to ramp up operations. But if you do that, I don't think you're going to be buying a whole bunch of extra materials because, quite frankly, you wouldn't be able to get the infrastructure fast enough for what the government's projecting, let's say a 60 to 90-day quarantine while we deal with the worst of this. The second option, which is scarier, is they're seeking liquidity to save their company because they know they're not going to be able to distribute enough goods to stay afloat. I hope that analysis is wrong, But just like what I was showing you this morning with the Minnesota ambulance drivers, where they basically made it where anyone can drive an ambulance with whatever's in it. You could literally take your old beat up station wagon, look like you're cruising like Clark Griswold down the Chicago highway. And if you're in Minnesota, that's good enough. There know some things, and you start to see the hints out there. You see all the stuff coming out of the UK that they were going to try to ride this out, and now their own epidemic modeling is telling them if you do that, you're going to be killing between 3.5 and 10.5 million people. And the people in England are just like, well, at least we're good at staying in queue. Actually, I saw a terrible joke on 4chan the other day, but I loved it. It said the only thing the English truly excel at is apathy, and we don't really care about that either. Just thought that was great, just. I don't know. You got to have humor in this thing, because if you don't, you'll go crazy. But what you have to start doing is looking at the economic portions as well as this, because the problem the government has is it's very simple. The government wants us to stay in quarantine at some point. It's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. I can't tell you the exact day. It did happen in California today. The Bay Area is now in quarantine. The 6 counties around San Francisco are going to be in quarantine as of midnight tonight. You're starting to see moves in that direction with a general lockdown between New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. You're going to see this in more states. We could go through them all. Eventually, they'll go forward and they'll let you know. Like Ohio, actually, is a state not with a lot of cases reported, but they think they have a lot. They have some good modeling there. Their person, Amy Acton, seems sharp. She's on top of it. It's a hell of a press conference to watch, because she actually has numbers that are at least in the reasonable neighborhood of the real risk of this. And they're trying to shut it down over there. Illinois is doing the same thing. A lot of states are getting it really right. Some are not. I'm looking at you, Florida. I'm just going to keep calling out Florida because they're doing the worst job of any state I can tell, although Maine is giving them a good run for their money. And I'm not saying that just as political sour grapes. Every state in New England is shutting down, except Maine, which seems to be oblivious. But that's what life is like in Maine, and that's pretty common because there's not a lot of people up here, which is what's going to save us from ourselves, as it often does. And I'm glad of that. So for the people who just came here, be nice, don't get us sick, don't make a mess. Okay. So what I was going to say beyond that is you just need to look at the trend lines. We're going to go into this. If you have questions that are specifically out there, we'll talk about anything. We'll talk about coronavirus. We'll talk about economics. We'll talk about the market. We can talk about geopolitics as it relates to the virus. I don't want to go into domestic politics other than to say there's been an interesting little quirk that elections are starting to get canceled because of this. I know that's going to be concerning to some people. The primary process being such as it is, I think most of these things could be rescheduled. But the idea that we're going to have an election presumes a lot of things going right. And I don't know how well we hold through this. I'll be honest with you. This virus is the perfect thing to reveal some of the problems that exist in our existing financial system. And we'll see what happens. From what I have been reading, when the Dow goes under half of its original value, or its, should say, optimal value, down under about 14,000, you're going to see perhaps a chain reaction that could fundamentally bring a 1929 on top of 1918. What does that mean? It means it's a new world, but here's my thought that's optimistic for you. We have a say in what that world looks like as much as this, and the idea that people who were powerful before are going to be powerful in that world is something we should contest if what they are presenting is not something that works to all of our benefit. And you can bet for sure there's going to be some competing visions. I'm going to be out there making one of them. So they're going to attack, and I just submit to you a very simple thing, that we need to be putting each other first. And that is a chance for us to solve a lot of old hurts and aches, and that's something we can do in this virus. That you're spending time now, for the first time maybe in your adult life, for some of you, you'll have the chance to sit back, be at home with your family, and experience life that was more like how life used to live, when we didn't have distractions, obligations, and responsibilities to keep us from being with one another. If you get to spend a month of your life alone at home with your loved ones, your spouse, your children, your parents, your any of those things, how much of a wonderful opportunity is that? And I always say that the only thing you can do is choose how you're going to react to the opportunities given you. So I'm choosing to react positively, even though there are people who try very hard to make it difficult for me. But you guys are not amongst that. And I want to let you know, everyone who's here tonight, I value you deeply. And everyone who listens to the show, man, I reach out, I answer every comment I can, pretty much. If I miss a couple, forgive me. I literally have spent half hour, even a couple hours in cases, helping people make plans, get to places safely. And now we're going to see. I helped who I could, and I'm going to continue to help who I can by giving you the benefit of knowledge, and hopefully you can make use of it. So let's go ahead. We'll go through this here. We're going to go through, see what you all wrote. We're going to go to the top of the list here. And So just say hi to everyone. Take it as a grain of salt here. Let's see, telehealth from home. Yeah, if you're worried about your job, by the way, you're going to be working from home in a week anyway. Don't worry about your job. It may not be there. Just get somewhere that's safe. Please do that. So if I was living in Brooklyn, would I try to leave? How soon? Well, I guess the question is contingent. And thank you, John, for that question. The question of whether or not you should leave is a question of where you're going to. I mean, everything's a choice between A and B. However, in a general situation of difficulty, presuming all other things are equal, and they never are, you want to be in a place of high security and low population density. That's the safest place to be. You want to be near plentiful food and water resources, and you want to be away from places where you expect that there may be criminal outcomes. So I would suggest that if you are in Brooklyn, assuming you are healthy and assuming you have means to travel, avoiding mass transit, and you have somewhere you can go where you would be safer in a more rural area, I think that that's a reasonable thing. However, I'm not so sure you're going to be able to do that unless you do that very quickly, because lockdowns are coming. Obviously, they will be leaky at first, so you might want to avoid the main roads if you're going somewhere. And I've said that to people who've been darting across the country now for a week. You know, the time to get to where you wanted to be was last weekend, but you may have an extra couple days. I do think there will be a nationwide lockdown. I don't know precisely when it will be. There's no way it'll get past next week by very much. And if every state starts to do it, I mean, it'll become really difficult for other states not to follow. The fact that we already have this in the San Francisco area, I think, is telling, and I would expect to see more of that happen. So hopefully that helps you. Good to see you, Notabot. Good to see you, Slammerai. Michael, welcome to the chat. Good to see you, Aster. Yeah, New Orleans is getting pummeled. Well, that's not surprising. They had a huge St. Patrick's Day parade, right? So here's an example of what not to do. And by the way, I promised I would do this for my friend Deb. It was D. I apologize. I'm so bad with names. Texas did shut down their rodeo, so they are now off my list of infamy. But New Orleans thought it'd be great to have a low last blast of tourist money, so they had a whole bunch of kids get drunked up, cough, puke all over each other, have a St. Patrick's Day parade, ta-da! Cluster in New Orleans. What a surprise. And I'm not saying it's that simple, but you're going to pay for that in Louisiana. And hopefully they are now coming around that and they will act more intelligently. If there are places where they're having big events, do whatever you have to do to get it shut down. If you can get the health code to buy you time, whatever nasty little trick, you're doing it for people's own health. And sometimes you got to do things that way. I think it's really just the way it is. Eki, good to see you. Hope all is well out there. Know what you've been going through. Good to see you, Rev, also. Let's see. Sensationalist media are such snakes, man. You guys have no. One day when this is all over, if you guys are willing to have a little bit of faith in me, I'll tell you how the world is upside down. Things are not what you believe at all. And you know, the way they've been responding to this, you know, the good guys in the story, right, are the people who have been just sitting here just letting people rot. It's so disgusting. I mean, and it's deeper. It's not a partisan thing, by the way. Actually, people think it's that. The more you get into politics, the more you realize that it's a patronage and structure things. People with a lot of power keep that power by doing a lot of awful things, you know, and then they just attack people who give criticism to them. And we know because you've got how many people? Actually, you guys tell me the story. How many people in this chat got attacked by people for telling them, "Hey, I want you to be safe. I want you to go somewhere else. Oh, you're just a fear monger. You're spreading doom porn. You have bad attitude. Why are you trying to make this happen?" What? You know, at some point, you get punished for telling the truth. So everyone lies, and that's what the West has done for years. Everyone tells lies because it's too painful to tell the truth, because you get in trouble for it. Because if people don't like it, they'd rather live a fantasy they believe than accept the truth. And the reality is we're coming into a world that's going to be bracketed by awful truths. We are going to deal with a virus that is worse than the Spanish flu, and an economic breakdown that's probably going to be worse than the Great Depression. At the same time, we're going to have to really step up, and that's assuming there's other stuff we don't know about. That's the okay scenario. I mean, I could present worse scenarios to you, and I'm not saying it to scare you. I'm saying it to prepare you, that you mentally need to have a mindset that, hey, I'm here, I have my family, I have my wits about me, I'm a survivor, and I'm not going to listen to all this garbage about what I have to think. Think for yourself, man. And it's okay if you don't agree with me. This isn't about you agreeing with me or me being right. This is about you learning to think for yourself and have the courage to say and do what you know to be right, even when others tell you that you're wrong. Because now there's not going to be someone to tell you what you have to think. And the benefits won't come if you follow the herd like they have for so many years. If you followed the herd at this point, you would have stampeded off a cliff. That's what's happened. Don't do that. Be a human being again. Be a spirit-filled being who has intellect and wisdom and can be something greater than themselves, who can help people. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to build that. And I'm trying to build that in myself. Look, I'm growing too. There were a lot of people at the beginning of this who I never thought I'd talk to. A lot of people who I talk to now who would have never talked to me. But it doesn't matter. We're growing as people, and I'm growing, and we're growing, and we have new identities that we form that are out of this. And I always tell you, you guys are my tribe now. We're the survivors. That's all that matters. What I did before, I mean, if you want to talk about it, we'll talk about it. But I have no animus in my heart or anger for anyone except for those people who are willfully leading people into despair and into sickness. And I for those people, man, hell is not punishment enough. And I say that in full understanding of what I'm saying theologically, just so you understand that. So thank you, Rev, for the Keep Publishing comment. Dan and friends, good to see you. First case reported in my county this morning. I don't know where you are, but I hope that you will be safe and that they'll be on top of it, hopefully. And this is another point I make it on the show, but it's really important. Talk to whoever your local leadership is who will listen to you, and the people who won't. Make sure they have a plan in place, or they start planning. Just looking at this question seriously will cause them to take it more seriously. So, Plasma John Doe, regular viewer here. Of course you are. It's good to see you. I live by a dusty road. My house is often covered with dust. Am I at risk from the dust? I wouldn't think that you would. I mean, there's a small chance that it could latch onto it if you're asking about the COVID particles. But honestly, it's no more or less. Although I would say, as a general rule and a good piece of advice, if you're doing any last minute things and you go to a small out of the way hardware store, get some extra filters for your air conditioning furnace or anywhere where you have air coming in. If you're worried about it, I think that's a good preparation to do this. Absolutely smart. So hopefully that helps, but I do not think you are at any more elevated risk than someone by a gravel road. I think it's very negligible. On silver hitting around 1309, is that down? Let me look at the silver chart since you asked about silver. So I get asked often about what I think about what would recommend itself as good currency in these sorts of situations. So just taking a peek at this here, what the line is that silver is going down. That's interesting that silver is going down. Silver, though, if you were looking at it in a long-term investment perspective, historically, gold, silver, commodities that are fixed goods have kept value. So that's something I know a lot of people who have stock investments are trying to put things in. I think it's a better investment than U.S. securities, to be honest with you. But on the other hand, if you have contracts on it and you don't have it on hand, what you really have is paper that says you have access to silver somewhere that you're not necessarily near. So what do I think? I think that if you're going to have some money on hand, and I'd be very uncomfortable having money in the banking system for reasons we can get into if you want, especially now that the Fed is on full quantitative easing and they've basically told Congress, you go ahead, we've written, which is to make sure that the bank power relationship with respect to the people stays the same. What we're going to have to do when this is all done, honestly, what we should do, and I know this sounds crazy, but it's true, is we should just write off all debts. Whatever house you live in, you own it free and clear. That's where you are. You get a nice little reset. And this happened throughout history. You can see it in the Bible. You can see it in ancient Greek history. It happens in places in Asian history. So it's something that could be done. And in a world like that, I was trying to explain on Twitter, how economics really works. It's not finance. It's scarcity, need, and what happens in that. So let's talk about trade for 1 second, right? So what is trade? Trade is saying that you have excess capacity and that you want to provide it to someone because you think the potential, either the reality of what they can offer or the potential of a medium of exchange is worth more than what you have. But now we are in a deflationary cycle where what you have is worth more than what you can get. For instance, in theory, the value of the food in my house, let's say, was $1,000. It's not really, but I'm just using that as a number. But you can't get it out there, and you need food to survive. Well, I guess now you have greater demand than the supply can provide. So the goods end up being worth more than the people who consume them. And that's when people become expendable economically. This is kind of why when you have a situation with how should I put it? When you have a pandemic or you have a really difficult deflationary cycle, people become an excess figure in terms of how the economic accounting looks. And that's why governments and the economists looking at this, what they call a cost benefit analysis, is them saying if we can only provide 10% of supply, then we have to allow, some percentage of the demand to die off. That's why they've been saying it's only an old person's disease or it's only this disease, because they made the choice of economics over health. And it really suggests that economics is broken because economics always has a level of scarcity. And right now we're seeing the consequences of unlimited consumption being presented as economics. So why am I going on and on about this? I'm going on about this so you know what to expect going forward, which is that our economic system will not work with the reality of the virus. And what that means for currency is things are worth what their value is immediately in hand. So in the short term, you're going to want tradable goods. The old joke was smokes, booze. What is it? You trade smokes, booze, bullets, and food. Those are the things. And, some other things that are a little less savory too. But ultimately, those things have trade value, and they do in a lot of breakdown scenarios. Money will probably lose value in its ability to purchase things, especially if there is a shortage in supply. And I think it's very likely for distribution reasons that we may see that in certain areas. We would definitely see that in a place like New York, because how are you going to get the food in there? I mean, when you have quarantines, you start looking at those highways, they're starting to look pretty empty. Look at Italy's highways. And Italy at least has trains and stuff. Europe has trains. The United States doesn't. Very worried about the food supply. Or if you're into this, Ice Age Farmer does a lot of stuff on farming. They've had so many things go wrong, and it's just really troubling. We'll see what ends up happening. But for silver or gold, having some junk silver on hand to trade might be a store of value. It'll be worth something on the other side of this, but I can't tell you how long it's going to be till we get to the other side of this. It may be very short, where we have 60 days and we have, eventually an economic bounce back. And somehow, they shut it down altogether. It kind of goes away, but it comes back, and maybe we have a medical advance. That's the super Panglossian happy option. Or more likely, or the other option is, the complete apocalypse now option, where, we're now looking at Mad Max as our lives 2 years from now. And a lot of things in between those extremes. And I don't know. We will assess as we go through step by step what that looks like. But what I would suggest to people who are thinking about it is that the one thing about whatever assets you have is if you only have them nominally, if you have them in paper but not in reality, well, then you don't really have assets. Where you're squatting is what you have. And that's what we're going to deal with for a while here. And depending upon a lot of factors, the competence of the government response, the ability of the economic market to hold up, the number of people who get sick, the number of case fatalities, we'll see what happens. And I will say we have new modeling out there that has the CFR jumping up a lot. You guys may have seen the article in the Lancet that I talked about, where they were saying the modeling of Europe at this exact moment is at 15.6 CFR. I mean, that's a case fatality rate. You're talking 1 in 6 people dying at that number. Now, is that number going to hold? They think, these are their words, that it's going to fall to 5.6 because it did in Wuhan based on the numbers provided by the WHO. But the problem with that is Wuhan had a collapse scenario that wasn't covered properly. They covered up the answers and numbers. And right now, even the director of the Ohio Department of Public Health is saying we are looking at potentially a collapse scenario. Why? Lack of ventilators, lack of personal protection equipment, lack of drugs. It does seem like the ventilator problem is understood. I've talked with a couple people. They're working on that. The personal protection problem actually seems higher right now, I think, in the scale of issues because medical workers are getting sick. We had articles put out there today. The first 2 doctors are in the emergency room because they got coronavirus, and it was bad enough. One was in his 70s. The other was in their 40s, both apparently in good health. This is troubling. And so you hear the story, 60 and older, yet you have a 40-year-old person who's healthy. Get this. Why does that happen? So I don't have the answer for this, but I've talked to some medical people, and I've developed a theory that I think is reasonable, and it's in line with the most science. Why healthier people get sick as this expands more. There's 2 reasons. Number one is that it takes longer to take root in healthier people because you can offer more of an immune response. But number 2, when more people are sick, you're getting infected from different areas. Think of the virus as gunshot wounds. If you're only fighting one person who can shoot you, you can only get shot once at a time. If you're fighting 3 people who can shoot you, you could theoretically get shot in your head, your heart, and your stomach. And this is so much worse. And so what happens as you go forward with this is you have something, a viral load. It's called a titer, and you can go ahead and get affected more. So if you look at any of those videos, let's use an example. There's one from O'Hare Airport where they were literally, and this is just the craziness of it, but they were literally, it had to be tens of thousands of people standing there waiting to get on planes, and every one of them was getting a fever screening. It's one of the great failures in policy, right? You're watching this thinking it's a good idea to screen people before they get on planes. It's a terrible idea to have them standing there in 8 hours in herds of 1,000 without masks in close, hot, sweaty, miserable environments. I mean, how did everyone in that environment not get sick? But it's okay. They got on the plane because, hey, they didn't have a fever yet. 3 days from now, you can go ahead. I'll tell you right now, I'll do your job for you, CDC. Contact trace everyone who flew through that airport. There's your coronavirus. But yet they were exposed, and they were all exposed to each other. So what difference does that make? Exponential growth. If you start out from $1 versus starting out at $100, right? And you are multiplying that times 2 every time. So in the same amount of time that you would start, let's just say $1. Let me do it real fast here. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. So by the time you get to 7, let's say 7 generations in, 128, right? Elements of virus, and however long that takes. I think it takes like maybe a few hours the virus can replicate, right? So it takes a little while to get in your system. But if you do it the other way, this one you only have 100, so you're at the same starting point, right? But do it the other way. So if you go 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, and you're now at 12,800. Well, you are a whole factor ahead. You're 2 orders of magnitude. And that's the problem with being in public places. That's why you need the social quarantine. And that's why the doctors and nurses are getting sick. They're being exposed to so much more of this that their systems are being overwhelmed. And this is why social distancing and quarantine matters, because it's not just a matter of getting sick. It's how sick you get. It's not one of those things where you get one drop and you have this. That's true. But how much of you get in that initial infection plays such a large role in what happens, I believe. And we see this with other viruses. So that's one of the reasons why I tell people, stay the F home. You absolutely need to. But if you have to go out, even if you wear a lousy mask, right? People ask me, I don't have an N95. If I have to wear a handkerchief, if I have to wear whatever, does it help? Yes, it does, because even though you shouldn't go out, you want to reduce your viral load, both of your intake and what you're potentially spreading without knowing it. That's how that works. And hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I'm always happy to share information. And I try to put this out there, and then I ask medical people, and they're like, yeah, that's reasonable. And I try to apply Occam's razor where I can. If I can give you a simple answer to something I do, the idea that if you get more sickness, you get more sick, pretty straightforward. I want to thank this show, since I'm told, I'm doing this all for the money by the reporter, even though I've actually lost my doing this. This show is brought to you by Dana's Tea, England's best. You like that?
Yeah, it is good.
The tea is really good.
It's tasty.
All right. Huge Fed helicopter dump. I agree. Reserve capacity will be depleted more. Anthony Gomez, as shelter in place, 6 counties. I'll be here prepared. Good for you guys. You prepared. So, honest question. Do I think this is related to population control? Man, you guys always ask me the easy questions. So, is the Georgia Guidestones story right? I don't know. What do you think? Do you want to comment? I'm asking the missus to interject here, see what she thinks.
I know you did, but I breathed in a whole lot of dust when I was cleaning. Okay. I'm all stuffy right now.
Okay. My wife
I can't conspiracy theory right now.
Well, it may not be. I mean, the truth of it is, all right, so let's make
Do I think they're legit? Absolutely.
Okay, so Dana thinks they're legit. Let me make the case for, let me make the case against. The case for would say that this virus conveniently spares the young, kills the old, removes a lot of deaths, and consolidates power in centralized institutions on a global level. I mean, honestly, if you were a globalist planner, right? Let's say those people exist. This might be your wet dream if you thought you could control it and you thought it wouldn't kill you. The counterexample is the way, and this has been bungled so badly, suggests that nobody had any clue what they're doing and everyone was caught flat-footed. So while a whole bunch of people will die, some of the people who will die will be the people who you would think would be in charge of this. But I do think the idea of population control is certainly on the agenda. And, when you look at it, one of the things that I am very concerned with, and that I'm almost as concerned with as the virus itself, even though that isn't the focus point of this, is the availability of the food supply, because it's a pretty common thing that after pestilence, you deal with war and you deal with famine, and those are directly related. That scarcity and the desire to fight over unavailability of goods will make a difference. In fact, I read a story about this. There's an island in Maine. It must be like Waldoboro or something. One of the islands off the coast in the Atlantic Ocean there has shut down all service. You can't go to that island unless you're from there. And you're going to see a lot more of this in the near future, especially if cities start having cluster breakouts that are really bad, and that you'll see people close up shop to stay where they're healthy. And that sort of problem that will happen will probably, if it goes that way, make it difficult for agricultural goods and other goods to travel to and between places, which makes me worried, because if you have people in cities and other places who can't get access to food supplies, they're going to respond very badly. And from that, you could have population control. There's some people who think the Earth has a carrying capacity and that the virus is a way of the Earth regulating what's happening with the number of people. And then there's other people who look at this from a biblical perspective, and they read Revelation 6 and they say what it is. And, I think that it's interesting to look at all these different perspectives. If you're curious, we run a Telegram group, t.me/unbirthday /unbirthday. We talk about some of these things. I will only say that here's my analysis of it, because I represent too many people who need to hear a steady voice for me to go down the own rabbit hole on my own. But I would say this, that globalization and the desire to put money above people were the two contributing forces that have A, put us at such risk, B, separated us from our families, and C, have created this situation where we have not valued each other over we valued the utility of people over the actuality of them, if that makes any sense. And I think if we don't get away from that, we won't need our global elites to be population controllers. We would do it ourselves, because we just want people to get out of our way in terms of doing what we want. And so I'm hoping that this spawns a fundamental rethink in how we see one another. And, that might be the tribes going forward, the people who can actually come together and who are realists. Because you got to be, the only way you can bring people together, the only way is, you can't say this group over that group. Because look, I've been in those fights. I live in those fights, right? Where I'm defending the group that's unpopular against the group that's popular. I'm defending the nerds who nobody likes, who will eventually be successful. That's what I kind of do in its own way. People don't understand it that way. But ultimately, we should be able to come together and reconcile. We have a lot of false divisions in our society. Like the idea that those who care should be separated from those who think, or the idea that women should be separated from men. Like, for instance, people give me a hard time, say, oh, will you support marriage between a man and a woman? I'm like, yeah, I do, because I think those are important instincts. You need the caregiver, right? And you need the one who goes out there and who works and who makes it, and that you need a balance, and that you need these dualities to go. And I'm just using that as an easy example that I'm familiar with. And, I'm not trying to offend anyone here. That's not the goal tonight. But the goal is we need to begin reconciling things that are important so that we can work together. If you have a military, an artillery, a cavalry, and infantry units do three different things, it doesn't make any more or less important. It's the ability to blend these attacks that builds a better society. And hopefully we can do that, and we can agree on certain things in truth. Before I used to do this, I used to say I had 4 core values that I talked about to all my people, and they were real simple. They were reason, nature, grace, and loyalty. And that's what it is. And I live my values, right? I think about problems. I look at what's happening. I'm trying to be kind towards others, and I'm loyal to the people who work with me. And you can go back and look on Facebook back in January when this wasn't a thing, or December before anyone knew what this was. That's who I did, and that's how I have to live. And a lot of people don't like that, because people live for a system, or they live for gratification, or they live a lie because they've been living it a very long time. So what do we have to do? We have to get away from lies. And our government doesn't want to get away from lies, because those lies are from where it gets its power. You give power to people over you when you agree to accept something from them that's false. And all I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that you need to be true, because that's what's going to keep you alive during this virus. If you don't respect the virus is just an engine that's cutting us down because we're not using common sense. We are making inappropriate, balanced things. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to survive and keep those close to you surviving. So that's how I look at it. And, people may look at it differently. But when you ask the question of what the conspiracies are, the idea that there's a grand cabal and a great secrecy, let me tell you what they fear more than anything else. It's revelation. And I don't mean that in the biblical sense, although that's also true. I mean it in the sense that they don't want you thinking for yourself and thinking openly and saying, hey, this is true. I am true. I'm speaking about the things that really matter and speaking truth. And if you speak truth, you can cut through any amount of secrets. I always say, was it a single candle can light up the darkest of rooms? And that's what we are. We are bright lights, and some people hate it. But honestly, that's how we're coming together and staying alive. We got a lot of different people in here, a lot of different takes. But you're all serving as leaders in your community. You're reaching people, even if just through your example, you're inspiring people to rethink things. You have a bigger impact than you know. I just happen to have been doing this a while, so I kind of knew how to kick a couple of cans down the road. It's a great question. I hope that answers you. Don't give them power over you. The idea that they're grand cabals doing everything. There are people who do that sort of stuff. It's very true, or at least try to do that. There are dark powers. There are things in this world that are unseen that people are not ready to understand. Maybe when this is all done, if you guys want, I'll pretend I'll be this generation's InfoWars. It's fine. I'll give you the information you want to hear. We'll talk about turning frogs gay. It's fine. But what I would say to you is that ultimately you have a lot more control than you think you do in terms of how you choose to take things. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Wuhan is still in lockdown. How long do I think this lockdown will need to last? Great question, Plasma. I think the U.S. lockdown, if it was complete, if it was a true lockdown, like a quarantine and people stayed home, like really stayed home, you could probably blow through it in about 60 days. If you agreed to keep the borders closed beyond that, which would be a political football, if you agreed that you were going to have certain protections in place, and if you could manage to make it not leaky. If this quarantine's even 5% leaky, this thing's just going to hide and it's going to flare up. And it's hard, right? You got to get it all at once. And the problem is, and here's the other if it doesn't mutate in the meantime, right? That's the other thing. But even in Wuhan, they went ahead and there was this Imperial College study that dropped the R0 from 7 to 3. It was still spreading in some ways. And that's a problem. So hopefully we will do a better job. But do I think we can do it? Yeah. Do I think we're going to do it? Not soon. The government keeps reacting, slowly backing into this. And the thing that scares me about the U.S. example is we really have no idea how many cases there are. I mean, Ohio thinks they have 100,000 cases. If Ohio thinks they have 100,000 cases, and they're right, that means there's 3 million cases around the U.S. And given that this thing looks like it's now doubling about every 3 to 4 days, let's just say 3 days, in the time they're trying to figure this out, we could literally have gone from 3 cases to 27 million in the course of 6 days. Go another week, you go from 27 times 3, 81, 243 million. You literally, if the Ohio estimate is right, we are 4 weeks away from seeing the whole United States, or less, I should say, actually infected with this thing beyond those who have self-quarantined and taken intelligent actions. Is that a scary number? Yeah. Is that worse than what the numbers I've seen suggest? Yes, that is. So I don't think it's quite that bad, although you have to get up pretty early in the morning to have a more dismal prediction than I do. I kind of enjoy being the flank of this thing, right? I try to put out there the worst case scenarios, but maybe I missed it, and it's possible because I would tell you that in January, and you can go back and check the record on this, it's out there, that I thought it was really likely this would spread a lot faster and a lot wider. And maybe that's good news in that people are, maybe the word's inoculated, I don't know, but some people had it who didn't get it that bad, who got over it without realizing it. And that's a very real possibility that maybe we should take some comfort in. I know a number of people who thought they've had it, who wanted testing, who didn't get it. And the government acted that way, and yet it got worse. Was it because this has been a deeper, tighter load? Is it because this is a heavier strain where maybe we were early infected with the S strain that was less infective? And then this L strain came over from Italy because a lot of the real blow-up sites came from there. I think that's possible. I think there's a real difference between what strain you get in this and what it does. And maybe the U.S. got the L strain late. And I think that that's a possibility that the virology needs to look at. And we'll cover it on Coronavirus Central. We don't know yet. It's so early and it's so fresh. I can't tell you these things. But it's definitely possible. And if that's the case and this is spreading so much, could this be truly abominable? Yes, but the only upside of it, if it's really bad, is that you're going to go through it quickly, but a lot of people are going to get hurt. And if it's that much, that fast, the hospital system will not be able to keep up. It just will not. I mean, there's some very good people up there trying to increase this. That's why we're trying to help them with spreading the quarantine. But even then, I mean, I was talking to a guy about this who was intimately involved in one major system, and he was telling me, you know, there's people on the board like, well, let's see how it goes. We don't want to scare people. I mean, look, I will scare the hell out of you every day. I'll show up with a scary mask, you know, I'll look like I jumped out of a Poppy song, going ahead, you know, scaring the crap out of you if that's what it takes to get you to save yourself, because that's my goal. I don't lie about that. And we have some laughs and we have some fun with it here, but you really do need to take it seriously, and you need everyone around you to do it, because even if you have a family of 9 people who quarantines and one black sheep who goes out there, well, it's that black sheep that's going to end up being the black swan that gets everyone else sick. So I hope that, you know, they will do better than that. But how long do I think it will last? I think once they get serious about it, it has to last at least 60 days. But if people break quarantine, if they don't keep to it, if it's leaky, it's going to go on for a long time. And if there's a new strain that comes out, I mean, and if that comes and it comes back out there fast, there's going to be a lot of issues. And I don't know. I mean, this is not something we're well suited to go through. And I'm not confident that we're going to have a mechanical medical solution very quickly. And even if we did, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't trust that, because it would seem too convenient. You don't want something that's rushed, you know? I used to have this friend of mine. I used to live with this wonderful Italian man when I was younger, and he used to tell me something. He was a restaurateur, and he told me there were only 3 things about restaurant business. He said you could have something that was cheap and fast, but it was never any good. And you could have something that was good and cheap, but it's not fast, right? And of course, you can figure out the third part of it, right? If it's cheap and it's good, wait, I didn't say it right. If it's good and it's fast, it's not cheap. And unfortunately, this is the equation we're kind of dealing with, right? If they put out something that's good and cheap, or if it's fast and cheap, it's probably not any good. And I understand that in a panic moment, you'll take what you have to take. I don't blame people for that. But with vaccines, you got to be careful. You don't know what you're putting into your bloodstream. And I'm not putting myself out here as a full anti-vaxxer, but I will tell you, I know that there were people who were vaccine damaged. And it isn't like when I was a kid or when Dana was a kid and we got just a couple every couple of years. I mean, they treat the kids like pincushions these days. And there's some real problems that result. And this thing with coronavirus, when they've tried to do vaccines for MERS and SARS, they had to cancel them because more people got sick from that than they did from the damn disease. And so there are a lot of problems with this. I would not believe in any magical cures. I do know that Dr. Fauci went on during the press conference today, and he said that they are working now in Washington State. They have the first test going with a vaccine candidate. It's a trial 1 with 45 people. It'll probably take about a month to begin getting results in on that, and we'll see. And hey, I want it to work. I'm hopeful. But I'm going to wait. I'm going to follow the evidence, and I'm not going to blindly trust the same people. You know, one of the things that the government does is they play on this tug between fear and hope, right? And if you're afraid, what they'll say to you is, okay, well, we have a solution, and we all want a solution. Believe me, I want a solution. My wife is a health peril, but I don't want a solution that's a bad solution. That's how you get tricked. And in American history, recent American history, how many things have we been led into, right? Saying, oh, we got this, and then it ended up being a terrible solution. So I'm going to be skeptical. Let's see what else we have here. So we're going to continue here.
Lots of questions.
You got lots of questions. Do you have any questions?
No.
No.
Chat does.
Chat does. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to see if you had questions.
No.
I have a question. Do we have any M&Ms down here?
Yeah, I always have questions, but those are in my head.
Yeah. Well, that's okay.
No, I ate all the M&Ms.
My question is, why did Dana eat all my M&Ms? They're not my M&Ms. They're her M&Ms. All right. I'm just reading through your questions here. Give me a minute because my eyes are a little blurry right now. I'm getting old. And I've been reading a lot. Really, it's just been working so hard. So we got a lot of stuff here. Scrolling down. I'm traveling from Utah to Nevada to hunker down with family. Will I be safe leaving tomorrow, or should I leave tonight? I imagine those are pretty rural areas. You should probably be safe leaving tomorrow, but I'd get an early start. I think you'll be okay. But if you choose to leave at night, here's the thing. You want to leave when you're safe. Leave when the weather allows. Leave when your health is. If you were up all day, definitely is something to be concerned about. You have to make those decisions. I had a friend actually who's on the road now, who's actually, if he's doing what he was supposed to be doing, he should be in Utah right now. He left California and he's trying to get home to his folks in Minnesota. He just beat the mess out of there. And good for him, man. Good for everyone who got to a place where they want to, and better still for those who could help others. We actually, I think I can say this, we actually volunteered to help 2 or 3 other people. It didn't end up working, but we were going to try. And, they elected to ride it out where they were, and I wish them well. And, God bless. Not about asked Tom, do you think there's a chance that martial law is invoked in the U.S. at what stage? I think there's a very good chance that it's invoked, and it will happen at the stage at which the voluntary quarantine is ignored by 20% of the population, 10% who don't give a damn, and 10% who are trying to prove something. And when that happens, I think that may lead to some very negative outcomes. I think that's one of the reasons why you have seen the federal government be very loath to put in a major quarantine. And when you're going to see these quarantines happen, you'll notice that overwhelmingly, with the one exception being Ohio, these are happening in areas that are more Democrat dominated because they are probably have a more positive view of what the government is and what it's doing than you would have in Republican areas. Now, it also happens that the quarantined areas that need to be quarantined are largely the cities. And there's an interesting, it's informal, but there was a survey on Godlike Productions, which is a conspiracy site that leans right, where they asked people, and there were many respondents, thousands, and they were saying that, would you go ahead and support a quarantine? And the answer was about 65, 70% said yes. And these are people who lean pretty far right, and they would be scared to the large extent of something happening. But they asked, would you take a vaccine? And interestingly, 80% of them said no. So if you want to know what you can actually get away with without having the problems of civil instability, and you don't want the look of the National Guard fighting militias, because honestly, it could come to that. I mean, these things are real threats. You probably want to have self-quarantine in the country, more rigid quarantines in the city areas, and have the federal government act that way. The problem is there's going to be a lack of trust. If President Trump goes out there tomorrow and says, we are going to quarantine the 20 largest cities in the United States of America, the elections will be withheld, and we are going to make sure it's safe and food gets in there, you will probably see a revolt in those cities because we have a lack of good faith in one another. And this sort of paralysis that results in our system is a big part of this story. How you deal with it is a very difficult question. What it really needs to happen is that we need social influencing. I mean, it's a terrible example, but it's perfect New England. You all probably got subjected to the Scarlet Letter when you were young, where they put the A on the woman's chest on Hester Prynne because she was an adulteress, and everyone shamed her. I know we're not allowed to do this, but you know what? It's time to remember. Shame the people who are going out and who are risking getting others sick without good reason. That's what's needed, because culture is nothing more than what people enforce upon one another, as opposed to the government, which enforces things through force. We don't want that, because that's when the quarantine gets leaky. It goes on forever, that you can't get the economy restarted, and you deal with the martial law breakdown scenario. I think it's one that, we could talk about more going forward. I have a hunch it will be a recurring topic on this show. I'm not rating it as probable. I do rate it as possible. It's something we'll keep an eye on. And the single biggest determinant will be food scarcity and how secure people feel. But there are other questions that could happen. And having faith in the government is a hard thing. I don't have faith in the government. If I wasn't paranoid at the beginning, I wouldn't do this. And I have a great friend of mine. He actually did some work for the agency, for those of you know what that is. And he always told me one thing. He said, Tom, being paranoid about the right things is what will keep you alive. And you know what? That's what we're doing. And it's okay to have fear. Fear is a rational response that goes with things around here. So, sorry, I just let it ring through. See, the thing rings off the hook all the time. Just put it on mute, whatever it is. If it's my... Who is it? Answer it if you want. Just close the door and see what he wants. Okay. So anyway, we're going to continue. Sorry. So you get to see the live fun that is my life, what's going on over here. Okay, so let's see. All right, continue. Did you read about Champaign, Illinois martial law taking away right away to buy arms, ammo? It can take food and supplies from your house, can turn off power and water. Yeah, I think that's a little bit of an overreach. You know what? I have some links into that area, actually, because I have a friend who lives out that way. And, a lot of times they pass laws. Hopefully they're not foolish enough to try to enact those laws. I think a lot of the intention, to be honest with you, with a lot of these laws, which I think should be very clear are temporary things, are designed to prevent people who have not prepared. I was reading this great story, actually. It shows the times that there was there's this big gun dealer in Omaha who was getting all these calls from Californians who wanted to buy guns from there. And most of them are left-leaning. Can I buy a gun? Can I buy a gun? They're like, no, you have to need a background check. They're like, what do I need that for? And it's just like this great moment of irony, right? Which is, there's this joke out there that, when you need help, when seconds count, government is only minutes away, And it's just true. It really is harder to get weapons than people think, at least at this point. And I'm laughing about it here. Because I don't think that the government is going to try to round up guns of people who are not causing problems. I'll be honest with you. I know a lot of people are worried about it, and I know why you're worried about it. In other circumstances, I would be worried about. Look, I've been targeted by the government in my life. I've sat at the border for 4 hours being questioned. I know a little bit about this world. I do not think that those are things we need to worry about. And even if they are out there right now, we have to get through the virus first. But I would suggest to town councils in places, including Champaign, Illinois, that they ought to be a lot smarter about this because there are consequences to the perceptions. And so much of reality is a perception game, and that's really the truth of it. The virus is the only thing that's real in terms of what we're fighting. All the problems are based upon perceptions and prejudices we come into this with. So let's continue. Oshigam asks, can you help us understand how paycheck to paycheck employed musicians are going to survive? You can't lay yourself off. So none other than Mitt Romney made an interesting suggestion, which he basically filched from Andrew Yang, which is that the government is thinking of doing UBI for everyone during this. Universal Basic Income is the idea the government's going to send you a certain amount of money. The amount he floated was $1,000 so that you could survive. Obviously, your landlords are not going to be able to toss you out. From everything I've read, the power is going to keep coming. I would recommend, unless you have, or if it is a question of financial scarcity and you're worried about not paying your bills, don't. And I know that's a crazy thing, and I know that's going to be difficult. I mean, look, I'm going to tell you straight up, I maxed out my credit cards 3-4 weeks ago so that I could have the supplies I needed. And, we'll see. If things go well on the backside, I'll pay them off. And if things go poorly, I won't have to. And, some will say that's irresponsible financial management. No, that's collateralizing an asset you have to make sure that you have the stuff you need to survive a spot. In this spot, the government is not going to go ahead and hold you to account for anything you do unless it gets more people sick or disturbs the public order. So if you are unemployed, self-employed, whatever, go ahead and work separately. And hey, you know what? If you're a musician, you know what I'd love to see you do? Go out there, make some videos, inspire people, reach out. There's going to be opportunities. People need that. And just focus on that. Don't worry about those other things because there's going to be so much to worry about in the short term. There's a very real possibility money won't work the same as it did when we come out of the other side of this because, frankly, we're all going to be so broke with the amount of money the Fed's printing that we really are going to have to look at this differently. I mean, you can't just keep throwing out trillions of dollars at a swoop and expect it to work. There is a debt-to-income ratio. In the same way, at some point, people just won't buy the debt. And when they don't buy the debt, what happens? Or if it ends up being fake and you have to go spend $100 on a roll of toilet paper, it doesn't work. And when people say, okay, this is garbage, let's reset. And when you reset, we don't know what's going to happen. I think it's the conversation we should be having about who we want to be and what's out there. So hopefully that works. Called an alarmist. Don't worry, you've been an alarmist. So, all right. So let's see. Continuously, some say the media is trying to use it to impose a communist state. Hey, look, the people on the right thinks the media is trying to put a communist state. The people on the left think Trump's trying to become a dictator for life. In reality, all the politicians are just trying not to go ahead and get themselves hung for screwing this up too badly. I really don't believe there is something deeper to this. And look, if there is, I'll be the first to see it, and I'll be the one telling you. So just have a little bit of faith to try to get through this. Have we talked about domestic travel ban coming this week? Good to see you, Flying Anger Pig. Glad you were here. Domestic travel ban. So the federal government, I keep watching this, and they are signaling really hard that they're not going to do this. Incredibly hard, actually. And it surprises me because I had thought they would want to do it. I had thought that that's something that would have happened sooner, but they seem content to let this roll through for a little while. And I don't know if it's because of, I don't know what their triggers are. If they're trying to keep the market afloat, if they don't have logistics in place, if they just have a bad read on the disease. I really don't know why they're doing it, but I know they're going to have to do it, so they will do it. Maybe they're giving people more time to get home. Maybe they're going to give them one more weekend. I cannot see this going past Monday in any scenario. And there's a lot of chatter Wednesday. But putting a travel ban in place is a really tricky thing, right? Because where do you put the bans? Do you block in cities? Do you lock off major roads? Do you start arresting people? How would people respond to that? So, I think the government might want to get there, but they can't get there faster than public opinion does, or they'll have a major crisis on their hands. And maybe that's what they're waiting for. Maybe they're starting to seed ideas. You watch people. The CDC said today that you should expect not to have gatherings greater than 50 people for the next 8 weeks. Dr. Fauci said he thought that we'd be seeing, other bans put in place, lockdowns put in place. We saw cities doing it. We've seen, the New York metropolitan area, San Francisco's doing it. Los Angeles shut down all the bars. Ohio, Illinois. I'm sure there's other states. We see other countries shutting down. Switzerland shutting down. Germany shutting down. Even the UK, for those people out there, they're starting to rethink what they came up with a little bit. New Zealand, they got a far left prime minister in there. She shut that thing fast. And they knew, and good for her. Good credit to them. The New Zealand people will benefit. But I think it's coming. I think it's coming this week. I think we might see it by the weekend. I mean, one of the things is, and it will help too because the kids are all home from school. How are you going to send people to work? The thing I'm wondering is how are you going to send people to the supermarket? I mean, it's a weird economy. I mean, and people aren't going to feel very good about this either. I mean, just think about it for a second. You got the people who get the high-paying jobs who are comfy sitting at home on the internet watching you and me talk, and you have these guys, these stock boys who make a couple dollars an hour, going out to the front line and going out risking getting sick, doing these things. Are they going to keep showing up? Is it worth it to them? I don't know. There's this really weird inversion where we're kind of dependent on the bottom, and the bottom might realize its own power for a little bit, or maybe they'll just look at make the sort of human selfless sacrifice. I don't know, especially if you start seeing stock boys get sick, or God forbid Amazon gets sick. We had the one case early from Washington Seattle, where we had the worker getting sick in the storehouse. And I think that their distribution chain is going to face some real pressures. What about your UPS drivers? Are they going to go? Amazon, UPS loses more employees a year at Christmas time than any other time. We're going to be experiencing that, and I don't know what that means. So we'll see. Okay. Let me get a quick breath here. So you are watching Coronavirus Central Unscripted. Tom Kaczynski here. And for those of you who don't watch, who don't listen to the podcast, I have a podcast, coronaviruscentral.net. It's on Spotify, iTunes, whatever. And they have so many others out there. You guys tell me, because I don't have a chance to listen to these other shows. Are they any good? I hope they are, but I have a hunch they're probably just regurgitating information you get elsewhere. I've been doing really a lot of work to stay in front of this. And I'll admit, I probably lost about 1 in 4 of my listeners when they started having all these up. But the fact that I kept 3/4 of them, I think is really telling that we put out high quality content. And it's one of the reasons I've tried to jump platforms a little bit, come over here to YouTube. And I will say I am considering, although I make no promises, but if we end up on full quarantine and we're sitting here and the news kind of dies down, is what we will do is we'll start maybe shifting things a little bit. I might get rid of the Saturday podcast show, and I might try to do 5 nights a week of this for just an hour. I can't do it for 2 hours if I do it that often. But where I get your questions out there, we look at it, we analyze it, and you share your stories. This is a mutual feedback thing. So when you guys tell me things, that gives me the ability to offer better analysis. So we help. So while you're here, make sure you smash the like, smash the subscribe. It helps. It gets me up to closer where I can do this. And eventually, I know so many people have offered to help financially. Really appreciate it. It does help because we're all going to be struggling through it. And honestly, your money isn't going to mean much anyway. But maybe I can keep my landlord off my back if it comes that way. If it comes to me, if it doesn't, hey, I've accepted this is what I'm going to do. Not the biggest thing in the world to me in terms of that. So let's see what else we have here. But we'll have that, and it'll go forward. Good to see you, Landon. Glad you are here. Let's see. I was like with water at our site. We only have soap, and they only have sanitizer. Yeah, don't use just sanitizer. Soap is better than that. And the reason why, there's actually a pretty good video out there of it, but soap denatures the protein coat on which the virus depends in a lot of viruses. So actually using cheap soap, I mean, you don't have to use cheap soap, but any basic soap, it doesn't need to be antibacterial, it doesn't need to be fancy. What you're basically doing, it's like, if you want to think of it this way, it's like popping the air bubble around the virus. That's kind of what it does. So yeah, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. So we have someone from the Netherlands saying half the people on life support here are under 50. I believe that. The Netherlands got hit hard and it happened quick. And it sort of goes to the point of what I was saying. I mean, Europe had a really obvious choice to make. All they had to do was shut the borders from Italy, but they went out there and did what Europe's been doing basically since 1990 and said, we're going to open every border to everyone. And they've kind of got away with it for a long time, but they didn't get away with it this time because the virus just doesn't care. You can't cooperate or collaborate with the virus. I mean, the virus occupies you. The virus is the Red Army marching in from into Berlin and Warsaw and all those places. Or pick whatever example you like historically. It just doesn't care, and they didn't recognize that, and it's really bad. So, Emmy, good to see you here. Is it possible that COVID has been in the U.S. far longer, or for longer than the first reported case, and is just mutated, evolved to its current form? Yes, it's absolutely possible. I think that there are some people who believe this was starting to spread as early as November. There's a little bit of genomic evidence out there to suggest that was there, and it really tears up the story of the fish market narrative. What actually started this, we will never really fully know, or at least that we will not know absent someone with credible narrative being out there. But I would submit to you that the actual narrative is just complete crap, and now you see countries starting to fight over who they're going to blame over this. Hopefully we'll figure it out. I don't know, but I don't believe anything I hear. So thank you for that question. But yeah, I do think the mutation. I think what I actually think happened is the U.S. was highly hit by the S strain early. That didn't get that many people that sick. That was covered up partially by the flu pandemic. And then the L strain came through in a second wave. The government wasn't ready for how bad it was. And that's why I've tried to reconcile what Trump says with what's happened.
Do me a favor. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you please make me a mod right now?
Are you serious?
Yes.
And here?
Yeah, I have to. I'm sorry.
Why?
Because somebody's not being very nice and I don't appreciate it.
I don't know how to do this. Okay, give me a second.
Come on, you're smart. You can figure it out.
I know I can't make you a mod because you're in as me. You're not in as you.
No, I'm in as you. I'm in as me.
I don't see you.
No, I'm in as me.
You're in as you?
Yeah.
I don't see you.
How do you not see me?
I just don't.
What?
Look at participants and it doesn't list you.
I'm watching you right now.
Well, type something. So this probably says you're not a participant. Just say hi. Okay, give me a second. Dana needs me to have an intervention here. So there you are, Dana Steele. All right, what can I do? Give me a second.
Yeah, where are you at, Seaver? You're not doing your job.
I know, that's not his fault.
I'm just teasing. I'm just joking.
One. So how do I do this? I'm not. You make me go all the way to the bottom. All right, give me a second here. Add moderator. Okay, here you go. You're now a moderator.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to continue here, and you're right. So you can figure it out on your own, hopefully. So, man, you see that? This is you. People say I'm the boss. They say I'm tough. Look at that. She just goes in there, bam.
Well, I'm just protective.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm just protective of you. That's all.
All right. So I appreciate that. Hopefully someone will do something. So all right, give me a second. I just got to find where I was because now I have to go scroll up here and I have to scroll down. Give me 1 second here. Shelter in place. All right. I'm going to get to all your questions. I always do, even if I have to get a little shorter as I get to the end of it. Says my voice will give out. So I want to say hi to. Where'd it go? Okay, I want to say hi to Phoenix. I am a firefighter paramedic. The wife is a molecular microbiologist. Did you say paramedic? No, I just flubbed it. I am a firefighter paramedic. The wife is a molecular microbiologist. We both listen. She studies in depth this stuff for her line of work. So thanks for the information. Yeah, you guys, please tell me, by the way, when I screw things up, but do it in a nice way because I'm a little sensitive about like when people say I get things wrong. I don't care if people hate me, but I really don't like when I get things wrong. And it just bothers me because I'm a perfectionist. So, but hopefully what I'm providing is helpful. And if you are a firefighter, hopefully they're giving you proper protective gear. If not, please make sure that's happening, as well as microbiology. That's actually really interesting. If you have access to an electron microscope, shoot us a message. We have a crackpot theory we'd like to kind of take a look at. I don't know if you can do that, but that would be awesome because we might have something on this could actually be really helpful to some people. And I'd love to give it a fair testing. So if you can, just reach out to me or Dana. You can see the things in here. Or you can send anyone who wants to reach me, by the way, who has private messages at coronaviruscast on Twitter. Or you can send an email to coronaviruscentral@pm.me. So once upon a suburb, that's a great name. Thank you for educating us early. It's made a big difference in our circles. I am very glad to help doing whatever I can here. I'm just reading through here to some of these questions here. Let's see. I feel this relevant. So yeah, the way people are traveling, by the way, in herds running into the grocery markets, man, it's going to make it so much worse. It really becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And for the love of God, can someone explain to me, of all the things to make a run on toilet paper, I mean, maybe it's just because I live in Maine. Maybe if I lived in a desert, I'd feel different. But like between leaves and trees, I think that's the one thing we can manage to get back going pretty quick. It's everything else that I'm kind of worried about, but who knows? But then again, maybe if they didn't have salsa here, people would have a riot. I don't know.
Oh, that sounds good.
Salsa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really can't get good ethnic food in New England. You got to learn to cook it yourself. I mean, if you want to have, a pot roast, we'll make, awesome food. Lobster, great. You want to have Mexican
don't
food.
sell yourself short. You make a mean fajita.
I do make a mean fajita, but that's because I grew up in Arizona, so I know how to do these things. Es la verdad. Never thought I'd be speaking Spanish again and enjoying it. That's a weird experience. Okay, let's see. I'm just looking through the testing here. I'm just reading real fast, so give me a second here. So good to see you. Good news, everyone is here, by the way. Glad you're all communicating with each other. Absolutely awesome. Ross, good to see you. Glad you're here, buddy. I hope everything's well over there in the Granite State. Good to see you, Angie. Southern Tennessee, Panic Part 2, the schools closed. The H1N1 2 article came to MSNBC, part conspiracy, part this. Yeah, look, I mean, if you want to be paranoid, I mean, I could, if you want, I mean, it's a good thing I'm not doing this for entertainment because I could put together, don't you think I could put together a good conspiracy story? Like I could put a tale together, scare the hell out of all of you. Maybe one day, if we're still dealing with this. Yeah, we do.
Like I live it because Lab 257. Plum
yeah,
Island.
no, chronic Lyme. Chronic Lyme is I live it. Point too. My wife. A lot of us believe Lyme disease, and you don't have to believe it. That's fine if you don't. But it's no accident that it appeared in Lyme, Connecticut, which was 11 miles from the National Animal Testing Laboratory in Plum Island, New York. And a lot of the attributes that this has are not unfamiliar to Lyme patients, including its immunosuppressive and potentially neurological invasive elements. So the idea that government doesn't play with weaponizing viruses, you have to have a pretty thick skin to actually believe. What do you say? You have to have a pretty thick carpet over that in order to actually believe that's true. We've seen some of these things before, and it's okay if people don't believe us. I mean, you don't have to believe people. It's just we knew what to see because of that. And my wife is a victim of this, and if she gets COVID, she'll probably die. So I have to make sure she's not a victim of that. Okay, so let's see what else we got here. But she is brave, and she is, of course, my hero because she's had to fight through all this. And I'm sure it's irritating to you on some level that we spend all this effort to treat this one disease, and we don't treat the one that afflicts hundreds of thousands of people, largely in New England. Hopefully in the future, we will have a focus on health. And let me just say this one thing. Absolutely. Look, I was a right-wing guy, worked for Ron Paul, libertarian, whatever. The days of thinking that healthcare is not a national value we need to solve are over at this point. It's a national security issue. It's a public decency issue. I understand there are problems. Let's just get it done. I mean, honestly, it's cheaper than the alternative.
We pretty much expected the CDC to flub this just based on our own experience with dealing with them and their insanely flawed out of date testing for Lyme disease.
You got to remember
it's a joke.
The CDC's job is to protect the government from you as much as it is to protect you from health risks. And I'm sure if we had flies sitting on those meetings and when the tell-alls come out, maybe at the trials to testify for their malfeasance, we'll find out that decisions were made on false pretenses. I know that sounds harsh. I understand that. Some people don't look at it that way. And I'm not saying it's your rank and file biologist, or I'm not saying it's every person. But I guarantee you somewhere in some room, someone's playing the role of sociopath saying, it happens. Going to have people die. Let's make the best of it. Hey, good for the economy.
Yeah, they're all up in their bunkers now.
Oh, I know. Well, if that's all right, if they come out of their bunkers, we'll be waiting. That's fine. I can wait. I'm used to being in the woods. I'm a country boy. John Denver was writing about me. A little bit of fun for you guys. Okay, so let's continue. My perverse sense of humor aside, and we'll have some fun with it. And we do try to have some fun, by the way. We're going to try to laugh. You got to laugh or you'll cry. I know some of you are still in panic. Some of us who've been prepared for a while and we're out of the panic phase, it does get easier. It really does. You get used to it. Let's see here. King Kush asks, Tom, I'm concerned about my neighbors getting porta potties pumped out even if they do it weekly and I smell feces. Is that even safe? I'm talking about septic tank issues. I emailed the company. My concerns got no response. They have a banner saying they're wearing gloves and masks right now, but that doesn't address vapors to public space. Seems irresponsible. So what I would say is if someone crapped out a turd, what a great sentence. If someone crapped out a turd and it was sitting there, as long as there was no flush to have the poop flume aerosolize the particles, there's no theoretical reason why the virus particles should leave the feces. So it probably is safe. Does that make sense to you in terms of it? Or as long as there's nothing blown? Because what happens with toilets, the real danger, I mean, not that you want to know this, but you probably need to know it. So forgive me for telling you this. But what happens is the danger with toilets really and these other things is you go down, you do your business, whatever, you flush the toilet. When that water comes up, it shoots off a splash that goes. You can actually find like videos of this and watch in slow motion if you want to be horrified and never go to a bathroom again.
Yeah.
Which my wife, by the way, was kind enough to find for me years before, which is how I know this horrible fact.
Oh, yes.
But this is the sharticles, we'll call them, which you can figure the portmanteau word, I'm sure easily enough, actually can come up. But with a porta toilet, you don't have that. It just dumps in the water. So you would have that little bit of splash, but it would go deep into the disinfecting water. So it probably is the case that in this case, the porta potty is less dangerous than your standard household toilet. Agree or disagree? You're the hygiene person, so you're the freak about that. So,
well, I mean, there's a reason why I'd rather go to the bathroom on the side of the road than in one of those porta potties.
So but it has to do with the smell more than I mean they're fetid, but
but like the fecal death plume is for real. Like that's a real thing. You can get it that way.
Safe? You're probably safe from COVID. There's other problems though. I would not love where you're in terms of that spot, but I imagine these things are pretty regulated, so I'm sure it is safe and it is contained. So I would think it's okay, and you're probably not going to get it. But if you're downwind, it will still be unpleasant. Can it get into our food like milk, meats, and vegetables? So I haven't seen any evidence that it could get onto the milk or meats, but the vegetables, someone could be handling that. I think that's the bigger concern. I would recommend that you do a spray down of it. You want to rinse everything potentially, or hydrogen peroxide spray. Isn't that what we use? Hydrogen peroxide for a vegetable spray, for like a fruit spray.
Yeah.
Like that, or vinegar is probably helpful because it's acid.
Vinegar.
Acids are going to melt this down. Vinegar is highly acidic. That's why it tastes how it does. Those are things you could do, you might want to do to protect yourself with other food. I haven't heard of any issues with the meat supply in terms of animals eating this and being passive carriers with this. We probably would have heard that by now. So I think you're okay. And I don't think you're going to have anything with the milk. I mean, I guess theoretically, if it was hand done, anytime something was handled by people, basically, if you want to think if something's a threat, try to think who has touched this, how recently, and how long can linger. If you can answer those two questions for yourself, you can probably answer any question about the safety of a given thing. So I want to say thank you for that, Susan. I appreciate that question. Michael, okay, glad you're still here. We are closing everything here in Michigan to get it under control, but we will soon have all these snowbirds coming back soon. Will they be able to reinfect us or infect you? Well, if you weren't infected or if they have a different strain, yes, they will be able to reinfect you. The good news, if you want to put it that way, for those of us who live in the north who have had some of the residents go down to Florida, this is going to sound bad. But anyways, if you have people who are seasonal residents, they're probably going to be stuck in their seasonal residence. So they will have the joy of enjoying a Florida summer instead of a Maine summer, Michigan summer, or wherever you're at. Because I don't think they'll be able to move, especially if they have permanent residences there. I imagine the government will probably try to facilitate people getting to their own properties because they'll kind of have to do that. But for the most part, I mean, I don't know, travel passes, permits. This is some of the problems of a quarantine that happens. And will that actually be something that's permitted? I really don't know. It's a great question. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of people moving here much beyond the beginning of next week. What are my thoughts? Genuine Kim, or actually, I'll do this in different order. Emily and Sure can't get to the food supply. Let's see. Genuine Kim asks, what are your thoughts about schools? Are they a risky environment? Should they just continue to stay closed for how long? I'm predicting here that all schools will remain closed to the end of the school year. They're not going to solve this in under 60 days, and I don't think they'd send kids back to school for a week or two at the end of May, because the problem is that kids don't really get themselves so sick with this. It's they get everyone else sick, and there's sort of a quick way to super spread because they touch everything. I mean, think of your son or your daughter or any kid they're going to hug everything, they're going to touch everything, they're going to get their hands on everything. They don't know any better, and there's nothing wrong with that. But schools have been a disease vector, and it's one of the things actually that's been really curious and I would dare say almost unnatural about this disease is how it doesn't infect children. You would expect a disease that infected high vulnerability populations to be very dangerous towards children. that this virus has been something that's been very curious to me in the whole thing. And I actually think it's one of the most compelling pieces of circumstantial evidence to argue this is of manufacture. Because if kids were getting sick, I guarantee you as a public response, we would have had much more. The reality is in the United States, we all still kind of defend our kids for the most part. But when it comes to older people, we're like, well, they put us in this position or this or that. And you understand all that. So I do think that they will stay closed for the remainder of the school year. We'll see if they come up next year. I think what they will announce is 15 to 30-day closures, and they'll see what happens. But if the virus spreads like all the modeling says it should, we're probably going to be dealing with this from anywhere to 60 to 90 days. And the government's own estimates don't see necessarily a peak till maybe July. Trump was saying August was something they were looking at in his presser today. Those are in good scenarios in terms of where we are in this peak and that we don't have reinfection. You know, a lot of diseases have this seasonal pattern where they'll come back with a vengeance in October. You see that with influenza, for instance. Will we have that with a recurrent strain of COVID? Will we have the ability to fight that? Will we have, you know, what will that mean? Those are real possibilities. And if you rush to send the kids back to school, you might be putting them in harm's way. So I think that it's better to hold back. Good to see you, Nike. Glad you are here. Let's see. Michael said, I left Tampa last week. Thank God. Florida's completely bleeped. Yeah, I figured Florida was going to be bleeped. You know what's interesting, though? You would have thought there that they would have really stepped up more given their vulnerable population. It's kind of one of those weird things. I think people on the left take science more seriously and people on the right take economics more seriously. And who ends up being a better leader for the time really depends on it. Like I said, I'm not putting any personal animus in this, but on the aggregate, the governors who have done better have either been from the left or had some sort of a background closer to medicine. Charlie Baker in Massachusetts maybe is one that's not terrible. He used to run a healthcare system who has a little understanding. Mike DeWine, Ohio, a business guy. But DeSantis, I don't know what the hell he's doing down there. I don't know. But I mean, it's the disconnect of politicians, the things that get you elected. I mean, basically, we elect prom kings when we need nerds in charge. It's something to think about for the future. I don't know. So let's see here. We have to take wild cards, right? So I have to take the bus and train to work, so I wear a mask, but everyone looks at me like I'm an alien. Hey, you know what? You are the species that's surviving on a brave new world, my friend. Be proud of yourself. I'm proud of you. All right. We have, so good to see you, Feral Blonde. Glad you are here. Advocate for productive speech. What did he say?
Inappropriate things.
All right. Do I have to? I'm gonna look at them.
No, it's fine.
Mass release or no? I'm just curious.
You can see it.
Oh, they were just attacking me. So, all right. So we had a troll in here. That's awesome.
Well, it was being indecent, and I don't appreciate that.
That's fine.
I mean, I have a sense of humor, but come on.
All right. Well, that's fine. Be nice. Look, we do have senses of humor, and I try to keep this sort of, let's call it PG-13. That's a little more accurate because I want to have a little bit of ability to say. But we're going to have something here. So let's see here. Ross says we have a collapsing economy. Injections into the banks. The virus will be used to take your liberties as you sink into poverty. Well, you know, the truth of it is, here's the thing about it, and I would say this, and Ross and I are good friends. We've been talking for a while. I don't think it's going to go that way. I think that if this collapses, the government will collapse with it. If the economy collapses and they can't pay the soldiers and the soldiers feel at risk and the police feel at risk, people have to live in this world too. I really don't. I know a lot of people who come from the right look at this differently. I have a lot of respect for them, and I've advocated this under other circumstances that maybe it could go that way, but not in this scenario. I really think this is a true black swan where it kind of breaks, and it's different than our expectations, including economically. This is not a controlled descent by the central banks. They are in mortal peril. They like to have managed panics. They like to have stage managed solutions where they can control. I don't think anyone's in control over this except maybe the good Lord himself. And but that's what I genuinely believe. And I think it's very hard to accept the idea that this is sort of spiraling to places we don't know. But I think that's what's actually happening. And that's okay if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll recalibrate. I think a lot of us are looking to create a construct to understand what's happening that looks a lot like what we're used to. And I don't think it's necessarily right. No, it may prove right, and we'll follow up the evidence. And if there's compelling evidence, we'll do that. But honestly, the most compelling evidence is that everyone's been caught flat-footed by a disaster that's beyond their ability to control. And that's kind of how I see it. So let's say Phil Blonde says, as a healthcare professional for 40 plus years, I can tell you that masks certainly do protect the uninfected. And we knew that. We knew that from moment one. The federal government, here's what they should have said. Listen, citizens of the United States of America, we have a medical emergency. We are asking our first responders, our healthcare people to keep you safe. In order to do that, we are going to take up a drive to go ahead and get masks to these people. We ask that you stay home, that you do this. But they didn't because they wanted to have it both ways. They wanted to have the economy keep going, and they wanted to go ahead and be able to have people out there doing that, which they wouldn't do if they were scared. So they told a lie. And as people know, it's the first lie that leads to the big lie that you can't get around, because once you tell a lie, you have to keep telling lies to defend the first lie. And that's where the government's at. They're defending policy decisions that were wrong by going ahead and creating policies that are irrational or reactive. And that's what you need to do. You need to get out of that cycle. So Lavestad Jock, I assume that's something like Dutch maybe, or German. Boston is nearing a complete shutdown of all person-to-person social interaction in public. Good for Boston, man. I mean, I got to give some love to New England, right? So, I mean, people up here are kind of prickly on a good day. And I say that with love being one of them. But ultimately, they're pretty smart. They realize the numbers, the science of this, and they've been acting quick to shut it down. Your states that are going to come through this are the ones that shut it down quick. And I said on the show today, and I mean no animus against my friends down south, those states seem to be responding very slowly. I hope they pick it up. I love visiting down south. A lot of friends, a lot of dear memories. And I'd love to be down there again one day, hopefully on happier times. But you got to be in front of this. You can't wait for it to happen. You can't say it's no big deal. And look, I say this as a practicing Christian who accepts the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior. Don't count on faith alone to save you if you're making poor decisions. You know, the Lord absolutely believes in faith. He also gave you a brain to use it. And I see a lot of people, including like the people in Iran who are licking shrines, or God forbid, you know, you talk about secular religions. Have you seen this coronavirus challenge? There's this girl who's going in an airline toilet, licking the toilet seat, trying to pass the coronavirus challenge. How disgusting. How foolish. Why would you do that? And yet we see that. It's just a lack of regard for our own lives. And we can't do that. We have to have some respect for that. You know, if you look at it from the religious perspective, your body's a temple and protected. And if you're not religious, then you understand the science of it. It works just as clearly. I mean, these ideas are opposed. I mean, we need to get past that and try to connect these things and just use a little bit of logic and common sense. Your brain is there. It helps you. Use it. The central bank virus is devouring the world. Well, I hope it's devouring itself. I really do. So, but we'll see what happens here. So let's see here. So, Tom, what do I think is going to come of this? Brenda McAllister asked. I think it's going to be a brand new world, man. And I don't know when it's going to start. I mean, it's already started. We are in the birth pegs. You know, we're in there. We're hanging around the placenta. People are going to value things differently. We're going to look at economics differently, the way we treat one another, and we'll see. And it's probably going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And we're going to learn some hard lessons. But, you know, wisdom comes out of learned experience. If I've had any success in this endeavor in helping people, it's because I'm used to being attacked, persecuted, marginalized, and having to say things that are unpopular earlier than other people say them. That I believe to be true, rightly or wrongly, and you learn things. And in the same way, you guys are all going to learn lessons. We're going to learn lessons. We'll learn them together, and nature is going to teach us something. And hopefully we will learn the lesson, or we will make the same mistake. The people in charge will say, this was an accident. We couldn't do it. Let's go back to the old life. But what I suspect will happen strongly is we're going to have the next 30 to 60 days by ourselves, by our families, talking to one another, having deep, meaningful conversations. Because let's be honest, all the old idols are smashed right now. All the old conventions are gone. You can say anything, you can talk. You know, I'm here on YouTube. That doesn't happen, right? So we're going to talk about things, and we're going to talk about the world, and we're going to see what's important to us. And I think a lot of people who are spending times with their family, with their loved ones, and they're at home, and they see people sacrificing their life, we're going to rethink what matters in this society, and we're going to reset it to something different. And whether we defeat the virus or whether the virus keeps going, and the virus may keep going a long time, we may have to change how we interact. But the fact that we're going to have to come together against a common threat and a common enemy, I think gives us a chance for a new future. And what I would advise people very carefully is don't accept a cheap substitute for the better future that you deserve on the other side of this, so that you, your descendants, your children, grandchildren, 8 generations from now you don't know about don't have to go through this again. And that's, the optimistic version. And who knows, maybe things will get a lot worse and we'll go down the full apocalypse, chain of events. I think that's possible too. If it does, all we can do is choose how we approach our life with faith, that we do things with meaning and purpose. And that's how I approach it. So do I think it'll get worse? Yes. Do I think we'll have an economic collapse? Probably. Do I think it means a full social breakdown? I don't know. I go back and forth on it. I am prepared for any of those outcomes as best as anyone can be. I would not be surprised by any of them. And my personal mindset has always been to expect the worst so that I can be positively surprised. But I do think a lot of people are stepping up. The social quarantining is happening. And the quicker we begin adopting good habits, the less likely we are to suffer from bad ones. So that's kind of my way of thinking about it. I don't know if that's right, but we'll see. I'm glad you guys had some fun with us, that you were able to, we tried to laugh here. So let's see. Brenda says, did you hear about New Orleans exploding cases? Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. On the show today, Mexico just had a music festival with 70,000 people going around rocking out, where all they did was check if people had fevers. So when you see a case cluster there, we're going to have to go shut borders again. And, it's predictable. I mean, people are being punished for their stupidity, but I don't want to say people are inherently stupid, but it's an education system that has taught people to follow rather than to think. There's an old saying, the burned hand teaches best, and that's what we're going to experience. A lot of people are going to get burned on this, and some of them will, just choose to fall away. Others will blame people and claim that they're victims, but I have a hunch that the old world where everyone could say, I was a victim for this or I was a victim for that, that's something we let happen in a world where there were a lot of resources and that we could afford those luxuries. When you have to choose between helping a victim at the cost of hurting your own family, which I think a lot of people who are not used to being in that position, which frankly is a lot of the sort of poor blue-collar voters in this country across different lines, the wealthy are going to experience this sort of thing in a lot of places. You're going to understand better the world that others come from, and that convergence offers an opportunity to have real conversations and try to make something better. Because I think that the core value we've been missing for a long time is loyalty. And, I made a step in this show of loyalty toward other people in trying to work for saving us on a universal human basis as a Christian and as hopefully a thinking person who's useful. But that we need to begin making those steps towards each other. And so many people don't. And that's okay. I mean, they're not going to change that. And I get that. I think the virus will ultimately consume them. And whether it kills them or whether the world they love is taken away and they revolt against it. Remember, that's one of the things, people ask about social collapse scenarios. I'll tell you something I worry about is people who want the old way to come back for good or bad. Bankers who want to be in charge. Ideologues who want to see people fight. Those of us who are sane and rational say, hey, we learned the lesson of the virus. Let those people fight the virus. Let them ignore it. Let them be casualties. And that's one of the hard things. You can't save everybody. You can only save those who will save themselves. The Bible says that you can't pass pearls before swine. And that's what you do when people don't want to listen. And we've tried, man. And pick your metaphors. It doesn't matter. It's the same basic concept. So Michael tells me the other shows I've seen are like 5 to 20 minute episodes, just repeating what you have in the nightly news. And to be honest, that's what they want. That's what they put out there. My show, I've been told I scare the hell out of people. What did I do today? I debated for 15 minutes, actually, while I was sitting there working on it and it was uploading. Was I going to put the ending credit on the podcast? Not the YouTube version, but the podcast. It's this really shrill kind of music that I love it. Dana loves it, but it scares some people. I had someone tell me, like, literally, it's like you scare the crap out of us every day, and then you put this alarm-like noise to make it. I'm like, I'm not. I guess maybe I did it a little bit, but honestly, it's just one of those things. I don't know where the balance is. I give you good information. If I scare you, it's because you need to be scared. It's not because I want. And look, I go through it. One of the things you guys, maybe you understand. I'm literally learning as I go through it with you. I'm trying to figure out what to put out there. Like, I have no idea what I'm going to put out tomorrow morning. But we'll do it, and then I come on here, and I may take some things from this episode, go forward, backward, and we'll talk about quarantines. We'll talk about San Francisco. I'm sure of that. If there's anything big that happens overnight, we'll probably talk about France. I know that Macron was doing something. I didn't look at it deeply, and we'll talk about how the UK is recalibrating. Okay, Dan says, I'm a truck driver and it's not. So let me ask you a question, Dan. It looks like the loads have been really going down if you're still around. Are we still having them? Are people still going around? Are there a lot of loads out there? Are you an independent hauler, an independent contractor where you're just picking the loads up as you go, or are you on contract? And I'm not trying to dig into your life so much. I just want to get a feel for what's happening out there from someone who maybe knows something on the road. I was a courier. I did hot shot deliveries for many years. I actually drove like 100,000 miles a year, so I'm very caught up in road logistics. And it's actually one of the things that has me most scared, to be honest with you. What are 5 things we should do right now before we are in complete lockdown? So, from a preparedness perspective, what I would say is that you want to, and I don't know if I'll do as 5 things. Here's what I would do. I'll answer this more broadly. Make an assessment of what you have in place and what you need. The biggest part of preparedness is being able to live and sustain your preps. If you come into this with the perspective that you're going to live a radically different life than what you were living before, you will probably fail. People who prepare like those optimal preparedness lifestyles take years to get it right. Like Dana and I can share all our misadventures from the garden where we couldn't get crops to grow because we planted things too early or too soon in the wrong place. And then that damn deer that's going to be venison this year, now that, the hunting restrictions will be limited. Anyway, my point is that you have to have preps that fit what you are able to understand. So you take baby steps, you develop skills. You need things that will sustain you that you are able to use now. So you want to make sure, I think, that you have 60 to 90 days food and water supply if you can, and you can get that. I'm pretty confident the power will stay on. It's a prep you would want to ideally have a backup for, but you don't have a lot of time. If you have medicine supplies that you need, try to get as many of them as you can. I would say it's highly important to get an alternate communication device, even if it's a little handheld crank radio. You need something in case the internet goes down. That's a real possibility. No one's planning that. I know the government doesn't want it to happen, but who the heck knows what's happening? I know a lot of people are out taking out cash. I think it's probably better to have cash in hand than in the bank. However, I don't think it's probably as urgent because I wonder about the cash purchasing power that you will have. Nonetheless, leaving things in the bank seems like a real risk when a bank run will probably happen if the stock market falls much more. And I don't see anything to stop it from falling, given that the world economy is basically at this point on pause. And, it's like pouring sugar in the gas tank. What it does is it shuts off the vehicle. So in terms of other things, what you can do at home, make sure you have what you need to feel comfortable. Make sure that you have what you need for personal protection if you have to go out. I would think it's really important to begin preparing anyone who's going to be with you to have a preparedness plan, protection plan, and you need something for security. Even if it's just a bat, you need something just in case someone comes knocking and you're not ready. I think those are important things. And from a prepping perspective, you're told you want to have food, water, communications, security, energy, protection, warmth, those sorts of areas covered. And if you cover that and sort of your basic medical layout, you'll probably be pretty good. But the biggest advice I would give to people right this moment is get to where you want to be for a while. And if where you are is not that, call the parents, call the kids, do it. Just do it. And as long as you're someone who doesn't get them sick and you're not in a quarantine position of yourself, that gets a little trickier if you have immunocompromised people in your life. So that's what we have there. I recommend that. Let's see. I'm coming back from New York City. You poor man. I'm sure it's crazy over there. So let's just see here. We're going to continue. Nick says, good to see you, Nick. Nick Lubach says, I drive a trash trunk and don't think I should be picking up trash for infected people. Shouldn't this be medical waste not going into an open landfill? That's actually interesting. I don't think the viral shed should be that bad, but you probably do want protection for this that's out there. And you know what? For you guys who are doing this for drivers and don't want to stop spread, put your trash outside maybe. If you're infected or think you may be infected, put your trash outside for a day, or maybe let it sit outside for a week if you have one of those like big trash cans in between, and give it a little time to air out. I know there's problems there, but I guess you might have living waste with maggots if there's meat in there. It's a little more complicated than that, but try to give your guy a break if you can. Use good measures and protection for this. If it gets really bad, one of the things that I am sort of thinking is likely that they won't take trash to landfills if it becomes that. You're going to see incinerators going up, and we saw that in Wuhan, although we don't know everything they were burning. So definitely important. Let's see. American Dental Association is recommending we stay open for urgent care proper as they aren't educating dentists about the proper PPE. We are referring the patients to the oral surgeons at the hospital. Yeah, I mean, I see the problem with that. I mean, a lot of people aren't being informed in all these medical practices about PPE. The whole main medical system, as best I can tell, hasn't been informed, which is why I think we might have a cluster when people from Massachusetts start coming up here. You closed likely permanently last Thursday. Yeah, I mean, look, we're going to be here for a while. You guys are going to be hanging out with me. We'll have a good thing here. It'll be fun. Let's see. The Xanderstone here from Colorado. Hey, I hope all is well out there in the Rocky Mountain State. Captain Bob says, hey, King Tom, God bless you. There's a long story to that, but it's good to see you, Bob. I hope you and Dino are doing very well this evening. So I've had an interesting life, man. Maybe I'll start telling you some stories. We'll see. When the media finally crashes, if they do, I'll start telling you the better stories, because otherwise they're going to give me holy hell. I like to tell stories. You guys can probably tell that. See, I'm just reading what you guys have here. Let's see. Trump said pump out porta potties. What they're pumping is vapor. Oh, well, if they're pumping out vapor, yeah, that's pretty dangerous. That's different. And I think you would be right to go ahead and draw someone's attention to that. Tom, the real question is, who is your favorite Kardashian? You know, I'm terrible to admit it. I don't even know. I know they're the girls from Egypt that are on TV that are known for...
They're not Egyptian.
Aren't they Egyptian?
No, they're Armenian, but I don't think they're from Armenia.
Are you sure? I thought they were Egyptian.
Yes, Kardashian is an Armenian name.
Is it? See, I know nothing about these things. I know nothing about pop culture. Now, if you were to ask me about the 18th century, I'd be able to say all sorts of things. But yeah, I don't follow that. Actually, it's funny. In my house, Dana used to make me watch things. She said, you need to understand the world today. I'm like, why? I don't want to. She's like, you're going to be living in it. I'm like, all right, you win. So I watched it, and then I just complained the whole time. But what can you do? So, all right, let's see what else we got here. Wasn't there a case of a 16-year-old in the Netherlands being infected? Yes, there was. And there was a case with a newborn baby being infected in China. And there's a 16-year-old girl in Romania as well. Young people get infected. They just generally seem to be able to fight it off better. Some people thought it's the thymus gland. Some people think it's just that young people have better immune systems. I don't know the specific model why. There's a lot of speculation, some different ideas. Let's see here. Yeah, Plasma John Doe really knows some of his stuff. I'm really glad he's putting this out here. I'll let you guys read it if you want here. Let's see, weed. I'm sure a couple of you have weed to get through this, whether it's legal or not legal in your state. It's illegal up here in Maine. I'll admit we have some. I mean, up here, it's interesting, actually. Drinking used to be the social lubricant up here. Now it's switched to weed. And, if you're in social environments, you learn how to deal with those things. It's different. I'm not saying it's good. It's just true. I'm just reading through your questions, so give me a moment if I connect here. And you guys are talking about what to use, so that's good. I'm not going to cover all of that because there's plenty of science things. And the people talking about science are having a really good conversation if you want to read this here. I don't scare you. Oh, I don't scare anybody, I hope. I certainly don't try to be a scary guy. I don't like to be scary. Shortwave and bass and plays. That's awesome. Yeah, if you want to have something for a hobby to learn in the off time, that'll be really smart. Get yourself a ham radio. Technically, you're supposed to be licensed, but I've talked to quite a few ham operators, and they tell me that if you follow the rules, and they do want you to follow the rules, and you should, because otherwise it makes a mess of the whole thing, you can actually have some really interesting communications, and you can hear things you won't hear elsewhere, and you need other sources of information, because at some point you might not be able to get Coronavirus Cast on YouTube or any of these places. That's why we're on Telegram, and if I have to do a show for 50 people, I'll do it. I don't care. I'll come out here and do these sorts of things, but we want to do it. So Throttle Grim asks, why are they not suspending the stock market? And the answer for that is, if they suspend the stock market, that means you can't trade a good and it has no value other than as a piece of paper. They are betting that if they stop it, they can't do anything except make the panic worse. And they're trying basically everything to signal that we're going to be okay. We're going to survive. You can eat that? That's supposed to be tomorrow's lunch.
I see you eyeing up my pizza.
Yeah, I am eyeing up pizza.
I got hungry. I was hungry. I made
All
you
right.
a piece. One's for you.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. You want the big one or the little one?
No, I'm not going to eat out of air. I'm not going to subject people to watching
when you're
that.
done.
Or if I start doing it, I start looking like Pizza the Hut with stuff in my beard if I start eating that pizza. And I'm not even kidding. I don't eat on camera because it really is an ugly process.
Yeah, well, I made one for
especially
you.
with this beard, man. I love the beard, but it's not going to survive when it comes to planting season. So, but to answer your question, Throttle Grim, the reason they're not suspending the stock market is because they can't start it again. I mean, at this point, the check engine light is out, the car is smoking off the engine, and they're trying to run this thing home before it goes into a ditch. Hopefully, I don't know. Well, let me ask the question. Let me ask it seriously. All right. So I don't ask this question on air, but I'll ask because we have a very educated audience. Are you terrified of the new world, or do you have a little bit of sense of excitement, maybe that some things that were broken will get fixed? And I want to preface this: no one wants to see people suffer. No one wants to see people die. No one wants to see people get hurt. Conversely, a lot of things have been wrong for a long time that we've glossed over because we've just said, "Well, it's not my problem. I'm just living my life." And at this point, we're like, "All right, if it's all going to crap anyway, let's say, what are we going to fix?" Are those the questions? And I guess I'd ask you guys, what are the things you want to see different? What are the things that you hope change? And what are the places where we can actually find something good out of this sandwich, out of which we're all going to take a bite? I mean, those are the things I'm wondering, and that's kind of how I look at it. And as we're coming up here, I'm up on an hour 45. I'm going to take last questions here, maybe make a couple closing thoughts, and then let's take a look if there's anything really terrible in the news right now, just that I need to comment on before I look at these things, because we'll look at some curated news sources that I have here that's happening here. Blah, 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 blah. There is happening Omega. Man, I read a lot of really terrible websites. I'll own that. But like some of these stuff that is just like, it's crazy. Like, especially the number of people who think this is a hoax, man. I mean, I've had that argument for years. I mean, you need a lot of people who wouldn't want to be in on it. I don't understand that. And I know the mind loves conspiracies because we all like to scheme in our hearts. But realistically, sometimes things just go really bad. But sometimes when things, they're really bad so I live off the forest, right? And in the forest, every now and then you have to have a really big fire. And the reason you have to do that is it's the way that burns off old growth and you get new growth. We have a fire going through and hopefully we get new growth. We don't just, look at the negative of it. And that's what we got to focus on, saving what we can, the experience, the people, and moving into a better world. And hopefully we do that. I'm really excited about that. So let's see here. You guys talk about that. Shall the wicked be punished? Man, you know what? I'll leave that to the Lord. My job is not to give judgment. Mine's just to say the good word. You know what I mean? That's all I can say about that. And let's see. The prepared new world is dangerous to the non-chosen. Let's see. Hey, we got a say in it. Remember, when they reset things, we have a seat at the table. That's really important. And the Xanderstone writes, I am excited that this has already uncovered many injustices, and hopefully some will be righted on the other side of this. I think that's a great place to leave it. I, too, hope that we undo some of the things that were wrong. For a very long time, I've hoped that certain problems could be solved, that we can reconcile things, we can be better people and better to one another. I certainly have taken my lead from the people who've been very generous to me, and that I've tried to return that generosity, keep paying it back, and that's what we'll do. So that's what we look at in the coming days. Keep very, very close eye. They're going to shut it all down. We'll be here. We'll be talking about it. I'll be back on Wednesday at 7 p.m. if you want to get me. And I'll be out tomorrow morning doing what I do every day, just putting out the best news and information, analysis, trying to help you guys out, coronaviruscentral.net. We'll be out there. And I always tell people, I don't really hit this hard, but if you ever want to send some support, we're going to have super chats soon in here because I'm at the numbers where I can get them. And we're going to have a website. We have a very talented developer from Montreal working on it. So I'm sure it'll be magnifique. But for the moment, if you want to send any support, P.O. Box 35, Greenville Junction, Maine, 04442. And I will risk going to the mail to get it because honestly, I have to. The one risk I do have to take, like everyone else, even though I'm entirely prepared, is my wife needs pharmaceuticals. I have to go out and get these things, but I do so very carefully. And, we all take chances, so we have to do that. Thank you guys very much for being here. I appreciate that. I appreciate each and every one of you. I want to say thank you for spending this time with me, with your family. The one thing I always close with, I just want to say, Heavenly Father, I just ask that you protect everyone who is here in this chat, bring them to wisdom and to safety, and that they come to understand the greater truth as we fight through these terrible days, and that we hope that you will restrain the sickness from those, especially everyone who's here, who I pray will be under your protection. All right. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you guys. Have a very, very good evening. Much love.